London, Ontario, 6th biggest city in the province, 10th biggest city in the country. A medium-sized city known for its quality of life. It's also the home of the University of Western Ontario, preparing more than 30,000 students for the jobs of tomorrow. But once they graduate, how many of those students will choose to stay here? Or will they take their knowledge, their skills, and their energy someplace else? And it's not just London. They're asking the same questions in Kingston, in Guelph, in Windsor, in communities across this province. Can these cities remain vibrant into the 21st century? Can they compete into the 21st century? That question, as the agenda goes live on the road tonight in London, Ontario.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin. Funding for The Agenda with Steve Paikin is provided by Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life. Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca. And by contributions to TVO by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the University of Western Ontario. Yesterday at our agenda camp, we spent the day, also here at UWO, trying to come to a consensus about the issues Londoners feel are most important to them as Ontario enters the second decade of this 21st century. And here is some of what was said yesterday.
We're not being as open as we can to the younger people about what exists here because we're not focused on that.
We need to start doing things differently and being more responsive at a grassroots level because the changes are happening and they're happening at a more accelerating level.
What is the 21st century London, and what is London's version of a 21st century city?
Yesterday, the themes of retaining youth, creating new jobs, and the London of tomorrow all came up in discussion again and again. You can go to our Agenda Camp Wiki, as we call it, to see what was said and add your contribution. That's tvo.org/agendacamp. And we have gathered here tonight at UWO to continue that conversation. We've got an audience, of course, some of whom were at yesterday's Agenda Camp. We've got the Agenda's Mike Miner up in the balcony hosting an online chat at tvo.org/theagenda. So, frankly, it doesn't matter if you're living in Guelph or Peterborough or St. Catharines or London. Tonight's conversation applies to you. So, go online to our homepage, tvo.org/theagenda, weigh in and let us know what you think. And now let's get to it. Our guests tonight: Amit Chakma, President and Vice Chancellor of the University of Western Ontario; Chantal Diashina, former elementary school teacher and current Fanshawe College student; Peter White, President and CEO of the London Economic Development Corporation; Jeffrey Preston, doctoral candidate here at the UWO and an accessibility advocate; and Paul Burton is here. He's Editor-in-Chief of the London Free Press. Good to have all of you with us this evening. I recognize some of you from yesterday's Agenda Camp. It was good to meet you then. So glad you could come back to be with us again tonight as we get into all of these issues. And without further ado, let's play a snippet of what went by yesterday and we'll come back and chat. Roll tape, please, Michael.
How can we best engage people who are not from London that are here, but they're here for 4 years? That's what a great window to get some emotional investment. So how can we get their engagement?
I think that the municipal government doesn't do enough to get the youth involved. You know, they can say whatever they want. If you're from the city, I'm sorry, but you know, there's nothing that says come out and be part of this community. I mean, I'm not talking about them just having the negative outlook on students in the community. That has nothing to do with this. They're not saying, you know, these opportunities are here for you, so you know, take advantage of them, or you know, your input is valuable.
President Chakma, this is nothing that you probably haven't heard before. It's something that happens in many cities with universities, this sense that there's a divide between the people who inhabit these halls for classes and everybody else in the rest of the city. How big a cleavage do you think there is in London, Ontario on that basis?
Well, from my point of view, it's more in our mindset. It's probably not as big a divide as some of us may think. You can look at the positive side, some of the things that we do between the community and our students, and there are many, many examples. That doesn't mean that we cannot do things better, and suddenly we are exploring many possibilities of doing new things and improving things where we already do a good job.
Chantel, do you see a split between, you're a Fanshawe student, between
Yes.
those who are in one of the post-secondary institutions in this city and kind of everybody else?
At Fanshawe, it's a little bit of a different story because we have many opportunities to engage with the community and the different businesses. You know, we have many co-op opportunities, and throughout the entire course that I've been in, I've been able to actually make a lot of different contacts, and so already I feel connected to this community.
You don't see it as much.
Not near as much.
Jeffrey, what do you say?
Yeah, in my experience, I think there is a division. There's a phrase that goes around with a lot of Western students, what they call the Western bubble, which is this world that you get sucked into on Western campus. And you know, you have to really work hard to try and get out of that, to get out into the broader London community. Of course, it varies from person to person, depending on personality and interest. But I think there is definitely a division.
Do you think that's a problem?
It depends who you ask. For the students, it's hard to say. If they want to stay in London, I think it's a huge problem that there isn't the connections being made, that they graduate after 4 years, they're no longer Western students, they were never really London citizens, so where do they fit? That's a big question.
Paul, you run the one newspaper in this town. People come to you for a sense of what's happening in London and Greater London. How do you see it?
I think it's inevitable that the students will be staying on campus and be thinking inwardly for a period of time, but I think generally speaking, it's not so bad as they spend more time here. They do get out, they move off campus, they learn about the city. Problem is whether they're going to stay or not, and that's when you really start to learn about the city and really start to interact.
And your job, of course, is to try to get as many of them to stay as possible, start families, start businesses, create economic development here. How's that going?
Well, and it's certainly been something we've identified for the last few years. We've done some phenomenal events to actually engage the students with the city and with the resources that are there. We just actually had our 3rd annual Student to Business Conference where we bring in as many students as possible from Fanshawe and Western to meet employers. And we had over 650 students attend our last event. And I think the more we need to do is really to make sure we're engaging the students as many times as possible. We now have programs for the international students. We have specific programs we work through different sectors. So we really see it as a keen issue for us because we know we are going to have workforce issues in the future.
Okay, but the numbers are really stark on this. I know you know them all, but let me share them with our viewers, because if you go to Fanshawe, 85% of the students who go to Fanshawe will stay and live in London after they graduate for a period of time. Do you know what the number is for UWO? 5% of the students who go to UWO stay after graduating for a period of time. You can't like that number.
Well, we can certainly do better. Do I not like the number? As a citizen of London, I don't, but as president of Western, and I would say that my primary responsibility of my colleagues, is to make sure that our students can realize their potential wherever they can find those.
No, that's a good point. They're yours when they're here. I guess I should have said, you can't like that number, because once they've left him, you want them.
And it is true. I mean, it's something that we recognize as being an issue for us, is ensuring that we do try to engage as many opportunities as possible for the students to stay. And certainly we have that difference between the practical elements that we have within the college versus some of the more structured learning we get, versus what do the students look for coming out of Western, and do we have the opportunities that engage them to stay in the community?
Well, Paul, I'm guessing you can't like that number either, because think of those tens of thousands of potential free press readers that you're not getting, because whatever's going on in London isn't enough to keep 95% of the UWO students here.
Well, there is, I think that most of the students who are here have a good impression of both the university and the city.
So why aren't more staying?
Well, some of them have come from a place like Toronto or a big city where it's a Bright Lights big city thing. They're always planning to return. Some of them are coming from smaller towns and come here and they stay. Some of them might come from a place like Halifax and think we're the greatest thing. But the city, I mean, it's a great place to live. In the end, it's all about jobs, right? If you can't find work, then you can't stay.
Jeffrey, where are you from?
Originally born in Port Elgin, just up the road on Lake Huron.
Okay, and you came to London at what age?
I came here in 2002, 19, showed up here for a week.
Did you come specifically to go to university
Yeah,
here?
I was here for my first year. Yeah.
Okay, and you're still a student?
Yeah, I never left.
Once you're finished with your postgraduate studies, What then?
Well, actually, I'd like to stay. I'd like to stay in London. I've put down roots in this community, and it's my new home. Port Elgin was the home growing up, and I was a small town boy. I wanted a city, but I didn't want anything too big. And I came to London, and it was perfect because there's still the community aspect that I was used to in Port Elgin. So I came to London, and I always say, London's like a big Port Elgin to me. So I'd really like to stay, but it's going to depend on jobs. It's going to depend on opportunity.
Sure. How would you answer that question?
Well, I'm actually originally from Sarnia, and I've done a lot of moving. I mean, this is my second career. We decided to move to London for family. I mean, I've got 2 little ones as well, and it's a perfect place to raise a family. It's close to my hometown, and yet it's also closer to Toronto. So, I mean, we've got the best of both worlds. And, like Jeff said, it's a great place because you've got that big town or big city and small town feel, and there is a sense of community as far as getting to know people here. When Toronto, you miss that. I remember I've lived in the GTA, and I could go months without seeing a familiar face. And when you come from a small town, you miss that after a while. So.
But it's interesting. Both of you are from smaller places.
Yes.
So for you, London is a bigger city.
Yes.
For many of the students I gather who come here, London is a smaller place that they will then leave to go back to a bigger place.
Yes.
So is that a problem for London? Go ahead, Peter.
Well, one of the things that we have a positive element is we also, although we have not as strong a retention of the initial student body that we'd like, we actually have very strong net migration, particularly of the 28 to 35-year-old population. And the reason for that is we've got a number of the things that people are looking for: quality of life. We have the best pricing for housing of the top 10 cities in Canada. We've got wonderful things for people here for raising a family. So, I think there's 2 sides to really looking at the opportunities. That in some cases we aren't going to be able to offer things, say in a large marketing firm, or we aren't going to have some of the jobs that students traditionally look for to get started in. But I think we've got a great opportunity to bring people back to the city from a workforce standpoint.
Let me just note to Daniel Kitts, our producer, those graphics that we had, just some of the background of London? This might be a good time to bring those up just so everybody who's not from here can know some of the basics: population, unemployment rate, and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, terrific. Michael, you want to bring those numbers up then if we can? Here's the basic 411 on London, Ontario, where we're doing our program from tonight. London is a population, I believe, within the city limits of about 350,000 people, 450,000 people if you include the suburbs. That gets you up close to the size of Hamilton, which is about 500,000 people. Let's go to the next graphic, and we'll see how you compare in terms of unemployment with the rest of the province. 9% here compared to 9.3% in the rest of Ontario. So a little better off, actually, despite the loss of manufacturing jobs. And have we got one more after that as well? Yes. Major ethnic origins. According to the 2006 census, this is what most people put down on the census form: English, Canadian, Scottish, Irish, and then German. I'm not making a value judgment, but it's not the most diverse city in the country. Let's just put it that way. There's no value in that judgment there, everybody. I'm just saying it. The facts are the facts. Let's start with the disability champion on this one. Does it, and visible minorities, 14%. Okay. Is this city as diverse as you would like it to be?
When I showed up, from Port Elgin, a very small community, we didn't know what the word diversity meant. Diversity meant, some people had brown hair, some people had blonde hair. That was diversity in my town. So I got here and I was like, oh man, there's other cultures here. This is fantastic. Now, having said that, I've been here for about 8 years now, and I am starting to see a lot more diversity. There are a lot more individuals who are coming into the city over the last few years who are coming in and bringing a lot more diversity, diverse cultures, and interests into the city, and I think it's great. I think it's making a much more vibrant place to live.
It's interesting that I think the folks at the Martin Prosperity Institute at the U of T, who were at our agenda camp yesterday, did a presentation, and they said the largest influx in the last number of years has been from Colombia. So that you're quite on about that. How about you on that?
Well, actually, we have a couple of fellow students in my course that are actually from Colombia. From my standpoint, first of all, my census form would look much different. I mean, I've got Jamaican, Irish, Aboriginal Canadian, Czech. I mean, I'm a Heinz 57, if you will.
You're a real Canadian.
I'm a real Canadian. But I guess for me, coming from the Toronto area, I've actually lived in Detroit. I taught in Detroit as well. We've lived in South Carolina. I've been around, and London has been a good compromise as far as trying to get the best of both worlds. Is it diverse as I would like it to be? There's room for growth. There always is. I mean, there's so much culture that you can, and different gems you can pull away from having different cultures and diversity. And the thing is that it's here in London. It's just that it's something that we don't necessarily highlight like I think we should. Sunfest for me is the gem of London. I mean, it's London at its best.
What is that for those who don't know?
Oh, it's a wonderful festival. It's a cultural festival, music, and you just see all backgrounds, ethnicities, cultures coming together and celebrating humanity. And to me, when I see that, that is when London shines, and we have it. And it's been a wonderful step in the right direction. And my question that I pose to London is, what's next? Because as I have family here, I have 2 little girls at home, and I think it's important that they see faces as role models that represent them as well.
Well, there's one beside you.
Absolutely.
Mr. President, where are you from originally?
I was born in Bangladesh.
Bangladesh. Came to Canada when?
I came to Canada in '82 as a graduate student.
You're replacing a guy whose name was Davenport.
Yes.
Yeah. So how much of an adjustment was it for this city to get used to a guy whose last name was not like Davenport?
And you may not know that Davenport actually was not born in Canada.
I didn't know that, actually. Is that right? but my hunch is... That's good. Where was he born?
He was born in the States, New Jersey.
He was born in the States. I was going to say, my hunch is he fit into one of those categories we saw in those charts a while ago.
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
I think that the key really is, we can talk about all those other secondary factors. The key really is what Paul was referring to, creating opportunities. So if we create opportunities, we'll create diversity. People will come. And then going back to your first question, it is not an issue of keeping Western or Fanshawe graduates in London. It's a matter of attracting talent from Western, from Fanshawe, from Toronto, and other parts of the world to come to London. So what it is that we can do to create that nurturing environment that values talent. And that does it in an environment that is very supportive, where you can raise your family, you can go to good schools, you have good daycare, good health care, and so on. So that's the challenge.
This came up many times yesterday. It was a huge feature in our agenda camp, and we actually have some tape we want to play of that just to remind those who were not there how we got into this yesterday. Go ahead, Michael. Roll tape, please.
After graduating, it's sort of just, why should I stay here? Like, I was offered one job. There's literally, I'm sort of in the new media field, so London has perfect potential for this to grow, like the new media field, but there is no growth in it. So there's a whole hurdle of businesses kind of, if there's more jobs for students, I believe students would stay, because the lifestyle is great.
Paul Burton, we heard this over and over again yesterday, that this is such a wonderful community, it's a livable community, has many of the attributes of Toronto without having to be a big city like Toronto and have all of those problems. But at the end of the day, if you don't have those job opportunities, particularly for young people when they graduate from the post-secondary institutions, can quality of life be all that important if you can't keep young people around?
Of course not. No, jobs are number one. They always have been and they always will be. The problem is that people, not all people are coming to London for jobs. Some people are coming here to retire. Some people are coming here to go to school. Some people will find a job or they will stay if they like it enough. But in the end, we need investment. We need, we need wealth creation. We need the usual things that politicians talk about getting to make a successful city.
Go ahead.
And I think one thing, every Londoner will agree that to survive and be successful in London, it's about who you know. And you have to get in these networks. You have to really work it. I've been in other cities where I was hired because of my skills, my credentials, and I didn't know anybody, but they looked at my resume, I interviewed well, and I had excellent references. And when I came here, it was a completely different story. I mean, I remember initially I came in, I had 10 years teaching under my belt. I had a bachelor and a master's degree in education, and I was seeking high-risk or at-risk schools because I enjoy working with that type of student body. And so not too many teachers will venture into these types of schools, but that's where I thrive. And I went into an interview, and I had a very good interview, and the principal looked right at me and said, you know, that was the best interview. And then I got the phone call, he said, but we decided to go with someone we know. And it was someone who was a supply teacher who had less experience. And so, I mean, that's pretty typical in this city, and everyone will tell you, every Londoner will speak of stories where it was a matter of knowing someone. And when you're coming out of university, I think that's one of the chief differences, is that at Fanshawe, we're really being taught to network and to get in the community and get to know people. And at university, and not just Western, but in many universities, you go there and it's about the academic aspect as opposed to the social and getting integrated and networking.
Paul, follow up?
Is it a positive?
Is what a positive?
It's not what you know, it's who you know?
Well, it works both ways, absolutely. I mean...
Because I wonder whether people from outside the city would say, oh, it's a clique or it's a closed...
No, you know, like honestly, what I found, and of course being a teacher, you teach like you're in a fishbowl. I mean, you really don't have to get out there once you're in. And so now that I've kind of, you know, gone out of that mode as an educator and gone into the, you know, I'm in public relations and corporate communications. And so that's a big part of, you know, this field is networking. And what I found is that once you just make that move, and you start attending functions, because there's so many networking functions in London for every type of profession, that once you start attending these things and you become a familiar face, because you can't participate in this if you're not familiar. And I think it also promotes citizenship as well.
Peter, you want in on this?
Well, I think one of the things we do see is that, you know, in established organizations, if people have targeted that organization or that specific goal for a career, they do need to have that capability to network and know the people in that area. But on the other hand, we know that there are lots of new opportunities that open up. If we look at some of the new investments that we've had in place, I mean, we've had 2 new companies that have joined us in the city just in the last 12 months. Both hired hundreds of workers, and in those cases, they weren't making a decision based on who was there. It was the skill, and in certain cases, you know, we still are, you know, they still are filling positions. So I think it really depends on, you know, what type of position that person's actually trying to achieve.
President Chaka, we've heard a lot about the creative class. Richard Florida, who's just come up to the U of T, of course, in the States, talks a lot about the creative class. How well does this city do in attracting and maintaining those who are involved in the so-called creative class, as far as you can tell?
Our record probably is sector-specific. Certainly in certain sectors, education, healthcare, I think we're doing very well, and perhaps some element of financial sector as well. What we need to do, in my view, Steve, is that we need to create a culture where networking will still be part of it, but that's not the sole criteria why people get jobs. People should get jobs because they're talented, because they can contribute, and I think we are making progress. So having Western as part of London, so considering the size of London, Western is relatively large, certainly contributes to that. Having large, you know, healthcare sector contributes to that. So the focus should really be following Richard Florida's you know, thesis, which I subscribe to, that we should become a community, and if you expand it, Ontario should become a province where we value talent of all sorts and create those creative class. When you're thinking of job creation, I think the best way you can retain top talent, you're young and whatnot, in our communities, it goes again beyond London, is really to focus on those, you know, creative activities that we can do, broadly defined.
Jeffrey, let me ask you a tough and blunt question, and I know you've had it before. Does this community value enough the talent that it finds, if it sometimes finds that talent in a wheelchair?
Well, I got to tell you, if you look to the Lieutenant Governor of Ontario and you hear what he has to say, he'd say absolutely not. Is that a problem in London exclusively? No, it's a problem in Ontario. It's a problem in Canada. There are these perceptions that people with disabilities can't work, that they won't be able to achieve the same success as everybody else. What we're finding, however, is that people with disabilities tend to have the most dedication, and they take the least amount of sick days. They are fantastic workers. Are they getting chances? They are, sometimes, but not consistently. And I think that's a fantastic element where London as a community can step forward, embracing the AODA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and bringing in some amazing workers who have disabilities who have been, the doors have been shut in their face elsewhere.
We've got a bunch of people in a very full hall tonight, including some who are behind you. And we have our first question of the evening from somebody behind you. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, in regards to the numbers of the 85% Fanshawe students remaining and the 5% Western students leaving, would that perhaps be
5% stay?
Stay, yes, yeah. Sorry. Would that perhaps be representative of the fact that perhaps more Fanshawe students are actually from the London and area than UWO students? They're more from outside of London. Just a question I thought I'd ask.
Okay. Chantel, is that your understanding of things?
I mean, and I know I can only speak from our class, and that is basically, I mean, we have people from Guelph, we have people from the Toronto area, Port Elgin as well, people, a girl all the way from Argentina. It's a very diverse classroom, so I mean, I can only speak from that. I can't say who's going to stay from our class in London. Again, it's where the jobs are.
We kind of joked earlier, there was a little titter of laughter from the room when the diversity of London came up earlier. There are 3.5 London seats in this city. It's a pretty influential group, actually. You've got 2 cabinet ministers and the speaker. And this guy, Khalil Ramal, who in a city that is thought, I think, across Ontario as being fairly waspish, you're born in Lebanon.
Yes, correct.
How'd you get elected?
Well, well, it just speaks volume of the understanding the people of London, Fanshawe, and the City of London. And I believe, you know, London, it's an accepting city, accept everyone, especially if they believe in that person and give them the chance to represent them. So it's a great indication. I got elected in 2003, and as I mentioned, not many Lebanese people live in my riding. So the majority probably, as you mentioned, Scottish, Irish, from different backgrounds, even though they came and voted for me in 2003 and give me the chance to present them. So it's a good indication about the kind of people who live in London, who embrace anyone, wants to be a Londoner, and they give them the trust to represent them.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for coming yesterday, too, to Agenda Camp. And just, where is she? A shout out to Irene Matheson as well, who's the federal member for this area. Well, not for this area, but for the area next door as well. You want to say a quick little something while I've got the mic over here?
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Steve. And I think this discussion about jobs, about needing to have the kind of jobs that keep the talented people in our community, there's a real opportunity in London. And we have some potential for the new economy, the green economy. We have the technology here in terms of the expertise at Western, at Fanshawe. We have some fledgling industries that show great promise, and larger industries that are looking at the jobs of the future, the ones that are economically and ecologically significant. And I think London has real room to grow. I have great hope and great faith in that.
You're not far from 2 Great Lakes either, right?
No.
Yeah.
So it's great, great, great.
A little bit windy, too. All right.
Steve.
That was not a reference to that answer. I'm sorry. Don't look at that the wrong way. You were getting offended for a second there. Can we go up to the back? Funny. Cannot go to Mike yet? No? Okay. Well, can we run the next piece of tape then? Okay, let's do that. Once again, an excerpt from yesterday's Agenda Camp. Roll tape.
If you only look at one aspect of the talent pool and you're not reinventing or reinvigorating or recognizing your resource pool out there that allowed London to form in the first place, or a Burlington or a Toronto, then you ignore at your own peril.
One of the excerpts from yesterday's Agenda Camp, which we did all day yesterday here at the UWO campus. This issue, Irene Matheson just brought it up as well. Green jobs. We hear a lot about green jobs. We're going to do a program, is it tomorrow night? I think it is tomorrow night, actually, on this $7 billion Samsung deal designed to create a lot of green jobs in the province of Ontario. When you think of London, though, Paul, I think it's fairly safe to say we don't necessarily think of green jobs. Should we be?
Well, we should, but we should also think of agriculture because we're in the center of one of the biggest agriculture, the biggest breadbasket in the province. the best agricultural land and the most potential both for agriculture and for green jobs.
Go ahead.
This is going to be a great community for green jobs. We have the two leading water purification and water treatment companies in Canada operating here. Actually, Trojan UV is now a worldwide leader. We're going to have the two first urban biogas generators installed in the province. We have one of the best solar profiles in the province. We just announced last week that we have a new solar manufacturer coming to London, and the University and Fanshawe are both leading in 3 different areas, both in wind, solar, and in water treatment technology. So
if I said London's brand, green jobs wouldn't be the first thing I thought of.
And
what would it be, actually?
Well, I think that's one of the keys to London, is that we aren't one thing. I think what we really want to talk about is the talent that we have, but we're a very diverse economy. We're very strong in a number of sectors. It's been one of the things that's really helped us out through the past 12 months issues. And I think really for us, what we want to continue to look at is that that's a strength for us to build off of. It's all the different areas we can support.
But if you're mid-sized, do you need a brand? He's from Waterloo originally, right?
Yes.
Now, they've got a brand. Whether you like it or not, they do.
Yep.
Right?
They do.
Does this city have a brand like Waterloo's got a brand?
Well, we have a different kind of a brand, not perhaps as well known. This diversity is part of it. I think manufacturing is another area. If you really look at our economic output, manufacturing, agriculture, some of those sectors contribute heavily. So we will have to be part of that solution for Canada's future manufacturing sector, Ontario's future manufacturing sector.
Paul?
I mean, branding is a pretty sexy topic these days, but some brands aren't working for Windsor. Say maybe they're not happy with their brand, or Hamilton isn't maybe happy with its brand. Waterloo happens to be happy with its brand at the moment, but who knows what it'll be like going forward. I think it'd be useful to get a brand for London, but we've got to tread carefully there and make sure we're doing the right thing.
Jeffrey?
Yeah, I think the idea of developing into green technology and the green brand makes sense for London. We are the 4th city, after all. We're a population that enjoys our green spaces. We like our parks. We have the Thames River going right through the community. You look here at Western. Western is a very green campus. We have lots of fields, lots of trees, and unfortunately, I don't get I'm not a part of the proud tradition of students who have to march up and down UC Hill in the cold in the winter. I got a little bit of an advantage on that. But this is a community that has lots of green space, and it's a community that likes their green spaces. So we have a stake in this as well in terms of developing green technologies, so why not?
I think the Forest City is a great brand, but I believe it came from the fact that we were forest before the folks got here and chopped them all down. So, and I think there'd be a lot of people in town who would say we're not doing nearly enough in terms of, let's just say, planting trees or the environment. We do a great job, but we don't do nearly enough, and we're certainly not rising above the provincial average to make ourselves stand out.
Gotcha. Well, while we're having this conversation here at University of Western Ontario tonight, there are people who have dialed us up on our website, tvo.org/theagenda, where they are engaging in an online conversation moderated by the one and only Mike Miner. Mike, come on in and tell us what's up.
Steve, a lot of people are talking about how there was a lot of Western students and former Western students here, and they said that a lot of people came to London without any real intention of staying. A degree here was the first step in a larger plan that maybe involved another university or another city. Reuser is a Twitter handle of someone who is going to Western now, and she said this 20-something is leaving town as soon as she's finished. Justin Peters wistfully said, "Oh, London, so many cute girls, so few cool jobs, so cheap to live, but for a reason." CJ is a former student. He said that he loved it at first. It was a great partying lifestyle as a student, but as he grew up, he didn't want to settle here for that reason. And another guy, Craig Meal, said that he was beaten up while a Western student and he decided to leave, and he went to Laurentian. And he wants to know if people think that the party dude university lifestyle has become a liability for the town.
That's interesting. Just before I get to you, let me ask the president that. Okay, this is not the first time you would have heard your university described that way. What do you think when it is?
Well, I look at it positively. We provide the best student experience, and what that means is that we are not just focusing on classroom experience. We have great athletics program. We have great extramural programs, opportunities to do many different things. So I think that makes Western very special. Yes, there is some partying. And I'll admit to that.
I think when they call it a party university, they're not referring to the extramurals, though, or intramural hockey or whatever.
That may have been part of our past, but certainly our current doesn't indicate that. In terms of quality of students that we attract the best and the brightest. If you look at the entrance average, we have one of the highest entrance averages in this country. So I appreciate that our students had fun, but I also know that they have done great things. So this is a top quality institution, and if you can maintain that quality and have a little bit of fun to go with it, why not?
I'm tempted to ask you, are you a student here?
I am not a student, actually. No.
Okay, because I was going to ask you if this is a part of university or if you ever went to class.
I'm not going to comment.
Okay, but you did want to ask this.
I did want to ask something. So a theme that seems to be coming up is the attractability of London in its smaller town features, but still offering the sights and sounds of a big city. Now I'm wondering, looking at the numbers of students that are leaving from Fanshawe and from Western, is maybe London in need of defining whether we are a big city or a small city before, or to help attract and keep the talent?
Peter, does this city know whether it's a big city or a small city?
Well, I think the city values the size it is. I think that in certain cases, if we went with rampant with continued sprawl of our suburbs and continue to just continue to put more highways in and more elements, I think there'd be a large portion of the city that wouldn't enjoy that. I think we've had a very well-planned growth strategy. We've had consistent growth over the years, and I think really what the city celebrates is that capability to have culture, to have arts, to have the underground music scene. Our John Labatt Center last year had 10 of the top 15 touring acts appear. We've got a great roster of events coming up again for this year. So I think the city really thrives in the fact that we have the capability to support a great element of lifestyle, but that we don't have to have all the issues that you deal with in the larger communities.
Paul Burton?
The short answer is that we are a big city, but we think like a small town.
That doesn't sound good. Now you better follow up on that, because that really doesn't sound, you didn't mean that as a compliment, did you?
I didn't mean it as a compliment, but I didn't mean it as a criticism either. A lot of people like it this way, right? They like the values that we have, and they like the way it goes. The problem is that we don't do enough to distinguish ourselves the way we would be expected to be, the way that Ottawa or Toronto would, engage in, let's just say, public art or parks, or, we're getting there on culture. I think we've got a pretty vibrant cultural community, and we're going there, but we're going too slow.
Chantal, does that concern you that this is almost a half a million people in this area? That's a fairly big city.
It is, and I mean, in defense of London, I mean, the one thing that, in comparison to Toronto, which, I mean, we tend to compare the two, but they are very different. But the one thing is to keep in mind is that in the case of diversity, that this is something new for London. It's a new concept. And so there's a transition, and there's time to adjust. And but the thing to keep in mind with this transition and adjustment is the fact that the wave of multiculturalism and diversity, it's going to keep coming, going to keep growing. And so you have a choice. You can either just sit back and just let it happen, or you can actually create space to allow things to grow and flourish and thrive. And that's something that I think that, again, there's a little bit of room there to grow.
Let me ask Paul to follow up on this again. You've been in London for how many years now?
A couple of decades.
Couple of decades. I hear this all the time, that Londoners compare themselves to Toronto, which I don't quite get, because closer to Toronto is Hamilton. You have one university here, they have one university there, one community college here, one community college there. A minor pro hockey team there, you got junior hockey here. It seems to me you've got a lot in common with Hamilton, including this population, perhaps big city, small time thinking. Forgive me for putting it that way, but that's the way you did. Why don't people compare themselves to Hamilton more than to Toronto?
I don't think I don't think they do compare themselves to Toronto. I think most Londoners, not necessarily me, but most Londoners would compare ourselves to Hamilton or Kitchener-Waterloo more than Toronto. And in fact, they don't want to be like Toronto. That's everything about Toronto is why they're here. Some of them, some of them want some of what Toronto has, but not all of it. And we know the good things that Toronto has, and we know all the bad ones too. So.
And you have had a championship hockey team here much more recently than Toronto has. We do know that. Okay, you wanted to ask.
Yeah.
A hand for the Knights, sure. Hand for the London Knights, why not?
I'm a lifelong London resident as well as an undergraduate student here at Western. And I hear a lot of people saying things like engagement, and everyone's talking about jobs and stuff like that. And I'm just concerned because students are a transient population. We don't know where to vote. We don't know to where we are a citizen and where our voice counts. And I mean, we have a undergraduate representative body as well as a postgraduate representative body. I don't see anybody here from them today. And so I guess my question goes to Dr. Shakma, and just at the university level, at university administration level, is anybody advocating for our political engagement provincially and municipally and federally, because we just don't know where to vote?
Mr. President.
I don't have that answer ready, but I'll certainly look into it.
I'd be interested, do you plan to stay here once you've graduated?
No.
You're going to leave London?
Yeah, I was born here, and I'm planning to go to Kingston or Victoria.
Kingston or Victoria?
Yeah.
Okay, that's everybody assumes you're going to leave here and go to Toronto or something, but that's not in the cards.
No, I like smaller towns, but I'm looking for a good law school that has an emphasis on social justice. So,
if they had a law school here, would you be staying?
There is a law school here, but
what's wrong with it?
Well, I'm more interested in Indigenous law, and so Victoria has a good one. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Michael, can we cue up that next piece of tape? Why don't we try that? Roll tape from yesterday's agenda camp, please.
The people who live in the city are changing. The people who come to and leave the city are changing, and their needs are changing. So we need to change in the way we connect, the way we do things, and the way we be responsive to changing needs. And that means moving faster.
Responsive to changing needs. Responsive to changing needs. That was something that came up yesterday, and I want to draw your attention to something I'm sure you're all aware of, this Conference Board of Canada report that came out recently. London came 31st out of 50. 31st out of 50. Canadian cities when it came to accessibility, diversity, and social cohesion. So we've got to ask this question: how open is this community really? Go ahead, Chantal, you first. You're laughing already. Well, how come?
I mean, I can talk from experiences. Like, again, I have to defend London because, again, they're
You don't have to if the facts say something else.
No, but I do in a sense because, like I said, multiculturalism is something that is newer to this community. And so unlike places like Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, where it's an international hub where that's a way of being, it's not that case here in London. So when things happen, like I've been approached and they speak to me and they think that I don't speak English before I've even said a word. Or just certain assumptions are made about me, categorizations. I mean, I remember actually supply teaching at a school here, and there was this little girl, and she came up and she just stared at me. And then finally she said, "I've never seen a brown person up close before." And it was just so endearing. I mean, it was cute, but it was the truth. And so that speaks volumes. And in this day and age, I mean, we're turning into a global community, one that is multicultural, diverse. And the thing to remember is that what kind of justice are we doing to our children when they aren't being exposed to different cultures and different ways of being? And so how are we preparing them for the 21st century?
Peter, 31st out of 50.
Well, again, it's an issue of what studies you're using. I mean, we have issues a lot of times with what the Conference Board of Canada comes out with.
You don't think they're a reputable organization?
Well, a lot of the elements they use, particularly on that end, is based on anecdotes. If you read the actual details of the report, and one of the things we find is they don't list a lot of the great things. They don't look at things we do with something like Sunfest, or the fact that we have such strength in our Latin American community, or that we have over 25,000 Arabic Canadians here in the London community. So I think, again, there's a lot of issues that London has that are perception rather than being reality. I think even within the community itself, a lot of times the glass is half empty here. I know myself, having worked internationally and having an opportunity to work in a number of cities around the globe, this is a great community. It has so many great assets, but
no one's disputing that it's a great community.
But we're in a situation that I think we need to do a better job of talking about the positive assets here rather than focus on the negatives that we have.
Amit Chakma.
I think what they...
Yeah. You don't want to step on Peter's applause line there, right? Okay.
They're definitely a reputable organization. I think what they capture is a point-in-time situation. If you looked at London over the last decade, I think very quickly you'll find that London has changed, as is Canada. So minus some of the major urban centers, mid-sized cities like London, they are changing. So if you look at it 5 years from now, you'll change those reflected in conference board report. So the problem we have right now is that we are not known. So even when you're recruiting international students, so Toronto is known, McGill is known, Western is not. We're going to change that. So similarly, when immigrants are looking at possible places to settle, they don't necessarily think of London. So again, over time, that is going to change. But the key to all of those is really that creating those opportunities. If we can create opportunities, then all the other things will follow.
Let me go to Matthew. Matthew, I remember you from yesterday. Stand up if you would. Lovely to have you here again this evening. Okay. You brought up a pretty important issue yesterday. Why don't you get into it a little bit here?
Well, okay. I'd actually like to address something to Paul specifically.
No, microphone's on. Are we
Okay,
hearing
we're
him?
good?
There we go.
Okay, I'd like to actually address this to Paul. It's actually tying into diversity here again. With London in the 21st century more and more reflecting a more diverse population, a vibrant mosaic, if you will, it's kind of interesting that London's media market is not really reflecting that with the people that you're seeing in the byline in the paper and on A Channel, things like that. And I'm just wondering if maybe that's why London continues to have a reputation of being a city full of Germans and Scotch people and all that. By the way, I'm half Scottish, everybody. Represent.
I'm Irish too, so I got some Irish.
Well, anyway, I just want to...
Okay, no, it's a fair question. Paul, go ahead.
Well, let me start by saying that I think that I do hear that a lot from friends of mine or visitors who come to see me in London. They'll say, wow, it's so white. But the fact is Londoners don't think that. Now, we have a different perspective, of course, but we know that we have a pretty vibrant multicultural community here. Yes, it needs to grow. I believe that we all know that. In terms of the media, the London Free Press, for example, we have in the past had all kinds of visible minorities employed in various positions. But I have taken note of the fact that they haven't stayed with us. You know, been here 2 or 3 years. It hasn't been that we've wanted them to leave. They've gone off to bigger and better things. And it might be, I don't believe that this is the case, but it might be just that they're looking for, again, Bright Lights Big City, or it might be the fact that they don't feel that there's enough for them here, or it might be that they don't feel comfortable here. I don't think the latter is the case, but I don't have a real answer for you there.
Once again, question from back here. Hi.
Hi. My question is mainly about a London Free Press article that was in the paper about a month ago talking about
Paul again?
Well, not necessarily Paul, but the article summarized the air quality in cities in Ontario, and London's was the dirtiest, ranking more than 50% dirtier than Toronto. And I've heard a lot of people talk about opportunity in London and jobs and green jobs, etc. And that's the #1 reason why people would come here and stay. And I've been in London almost 20 years, and I have 3 kids who have suffered from asthma, and we noticed the air, and I went to Western, etc. And I do agree this is a great city, but I'm thinking about leaving, and I think that might be part of the reason why it's hard to attract and retain, because of the air. If you can't breathe here, what good is the opportunity, right?
It's merely...
Okay. Paul, then Peter.
I think it's merely a result of our geography here and the prevailing winds. I'll let Peter could talk about it more, because I'm sure he does. But
go ahead, Peter.
The city does a pretty good job of trying to battle that, I believe.
Peter, go ahead.
That report actually included, and it was unfortunate that we didn't have some clarification, that report actually included Sarnia as part of the London region. So that air pollution quotient that you saw, and we know that the challenges that the Sarnia region has because of the petrochemical industry, the challenges you saw. But if you actually look at the overall numbers that come out from the Ministry of the Environment, London's air pollution, although it's not the best in the province, certainly for the larger communities, it works quite well.
So the city's getting a bad rap on that then?
Well, on that specific report we did. I felt, again, it was based that it included that whole region, and specifically the numbers coming out of the Sarnia region are going to impact that significantly.
Forgive my ignorance on this, is Detroit an issue as well? They've got...
All of Ohio is.
All of Ohio, and the prevailing winds bring it up here. And Michigan, yeah. Okay. We've got a few minutes left here, and I know you have, you love your city, it's obvious, and you want to paint as good a picture of the city as you feel is reasonably possible, while at the same time still paying homage to the truth. But having said that, I do want to make sure that we leave this hour by giving all of you an opportunity to say what you still think this community needs to work on. It's a lovely place, obviously, but it's not perfect. So let's 30 seconds to each of you. What does this town still need to work on? Jeffrey, go ahead.
Well, a big one for me is accessibility. As you mentioned on the report earlier, accessibility is an issue. Municipal government needs to listen. But more than that, I think we need to start engaging our young people. I think we need to stop with the divisive politics that are happening at City Hall right now and start bringing young people in and saying, you know, enough with the fighting and the bickering. Let's start talking together. Let's work together as a community.
Okay, I want to make sure I get everybody in here. Paul?
I'll echo that. Political cooperation, and not just in the city, but regionally. I mean, we need to work more with the other towns like Woodstock or all the other municipalities. And there's a lot of political bickering and a political maneuvering that is unnecessary if we're going to work on behalf of all of us.
You've got 4 Liberals provincially here. Federally, 2 Tories, 1 Liberal, 1 New Democrat. You're all over the place here. I'm trying to figure out where this town is politically. It's a little difficult than that. Okay, Chantal?
I'm going to say that instead of the city at large, I'm going to go for the citizens and the fact that those of us who are visible minorities, it's a call out to us to actually position ourselves in leadership roles and role model places instead of just sitting around and complaining about it. Get out there, Khalil has spoken about, get to know people, and there may be times where there might be some barriers to break through, but the thing that I ask is that we be patient and remember that this city is still trying to adjust and transition
Growing
into.
pains. Got it. Dr. Chuckman.
I think we need to believe in ourselves. We need to believe that we have a great future. We have the elements of building a great future, and that has to be based on talents. And I think we need to dream big, and I echo Paul's sentiments. We need to work together. We can't just wait for somebody else to come and help us. We need to be masters of our own destiny.
Okay, you get the last 30, Peter.
Wealth creation and regional strategies. This isn't a typical recession and recovery that we're going through. We have a shift in the economy, and London is the epicenter for a large region, the whole southwestern Ontario region, and it's important for us to be able to ensure that the whole area is strong, because without the whole region, London will continue to be affected. And I think for us, both from the provincial and the federal standpoint, we need their support to help us work through this shift.
And I should point out there is provincial and federal political influence in the room here tonight, not municipal, not because they weren't invited or they didn't want to be here, but there's a city council meeting tonight. So I know the mayor wanted to be here and some of the councilors, but they're doing their jobs. They haven't prorogued city council, from what I've heard. Okay, that's that. My thanks to our guests for coming this evening and being on our program. We're really grateful the 5 of you could spend so much time at Agenda Camp with us yesterday and to be here again tonight. To our audience who came and forewent whatever other plans you had for this evening, we're glad that you could be with us as well this evening. I do want to thank the good Vice Chancellor and President's University. UWO has been spectacular to us, both at yesterday's Agenda Camp hosting us and then, of course, for the broadcast tonight. Thank you for welcoming us, for opening your doors, and we've really had a wonderful time here. So thank you very much for that. Now, for more information about tonight's guests and the Agenda Camp Wiki, which we've talked about all night long, please visit us on our homepage, tvo.org/theagenda. Tonight's program was produced by Daniel Kitts. Thanks so much, Daniel. And we'll be right back with Mike Miner as he wraps up the web chat. Watch this first, please.
Dad? Every crime... Did you use the knife, Juliet? ...has a motive.
Did anyone ask her why she did it?
When it's a crime of passion... I want to examine for rape. Everyone gets hurt. If I stand up for her, things get worse for her. For 5 riveting episodes, follow the twists and turns of a sordid case. Mommy! No, I want to see her! Criminal Justice, tomorrow at 9 on TVO. Funding for The Agenda with Steve Paikin is provided by Vale Inco Limited, a pioneering nickel mining company transforming mineral resources into essential ingredients for everyday life. Ontario's 33,000 chartered accountants, public policy leaders since 1879. More information is available at casforchange.ca. and by contributions to TVO by viewers like you. Thank you.
Okay, Mike Miner, coming in here one more time and tell us what's been happening online tonight.
It's been very busy. The chat was full. We had literally hundreds of tweets. Those of you who are tweeting in the audience, I'm on to you. So what people kept coming to again and again is that London is often called the biggest small town in Ontario. And they wanted to know, why is it considered a small town? Why can't it get some metropolitan cred? And there was a lot of discussion about how to break out of that mentality. And there was a lot of talk about just jobs, jobs, jobs. They needed opportunities, particularly for people who are fresh out of university. Marcin wrote, what's needed is greater access to mentorship, venture capital, and all of that to let students follow through on what they've learned here in the community. And she pointed to Waterloo as a good role model. And just to point something out, Paul Burton is doing his bit because two people in the chat who said that they were lucky enough to find jobs and stay here work at the London Free Press.
Aha. There you go. Shout out for Paul tonight. All right. Mike, thanks so much. You'll keep moderating that chat till we go off the air. And of course, anytime anybody wants to follow that chat, tvo.org/theagenda is the homepage. And that is the agenda for Monday, February 1st, 2010. Tomorrow night, we shine the spotlight on the McGuinty government's $7 billion Samsung deal. You know that one, the one to develop the green energy industry in Ontario. And the thinking may be that some of those jobs might come to this area, as we heard, to Great Lakes. Lots of wind, although not in that way, Irene. I'm not going there again, okay? Yeah, so we're going to shine a spotlight on that. We've got the minister, the new minister, Brad Dogood, who's in charge of energy and infrastructure, even though it was George Smitherman in his former capacity who signed that deal for the province of Ontario. Brad Dogood is now the minister in charge. He will be on the program tomorrow night to take our questions on that. We'll follow up with a discussion after the minister leaves us on that $7 billion Samsung deal. So the agenda will be coming back on the road in a month with a agenda camp on the Sunday, followed by a live broadcast on the Monday. Next time we go to Eastern Ontario, Brockville, we're coming to you. So if you live in Eastern Ontario, you want to join our agenda camp or come to the live broadcast, go onto the homepage, tvo.org/theagenda, sign up, and we look forward to doing this all over again for what will be the 7th time. I'm Steve Paikin. Thanks for watching TVO, for joining us online at tvo.org, and we say good night from London, Ontario. Thank you. Well done. Well done.